Good morning, everybody. A very warm welcome to our members and friends. Susanne Reisinger-Anders speaking. It's also a pleasure for me to welcome our friends and guests from AmCham Croatia. And I'm very much honored to welcome Jean-Pierre Kallanian as our guest speaker. Jean-Pierre is the CEO of EPIConsulting. As a human systems expert, he assists companies in resolving conflict and ensuring a human-centered digital transformation process. He is the author of What You Can Learn from Your Teenagers, Lessons in Parenting and Personal Growth. His book promotes the youth-inspired EPIC model, and EPIC stands for Explore, Play, Inspire, and Connect, encouraging parents to view their transformative teenage years as a personal growth opportunity. Jean-Pierre similarly applies the EPIC model in companies seeking to enhance apprenticeship, onboarding, and retention initiatives. A leader in his field with over 20 years experience, Jean-Pierre has spoken internationally on youth-related topics and change facilitation. Born in the United States and now living in Austria since 2013, he has degrees in international business and counseling psychology and is trained in conflict de-escalation, mediation, and negotiation. Yes, and today we're designing this webinar very interactive. This means that in between the individual contributions of the lecture, you will have the opportunity to exchange your opinions in chat rooms. So Jean-Pierre, you will handle this randomly and invite our guests to the chat rooms. Afterwards, there's, of course, the possibility for questions and answers. And I think, so now we are really looking forward to your presentation with the topic, adapting to change or changing to adapt. Jean-Pierre, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Susanna, for this nice introduction. Good morning, everybody. Today's topic of adapting to change or changing to adapt is one that we are all currently living in. I think for the most part with the whole COVID situation, we're more so in the former, the adapting to change. But my point is with this presentation, or at least one part of it is to see how can or why companies and organizations and individuals should adopt more of a changing to adapt mentality. And I'll get into that a little bit more. I'll also explain a little bit more of the EPIC model, which I'm hoping to actually embody today by having this a bit more interactive so that we can explore a little bit, have some fun, be inspired by each other's stories, and make new connections. So I'll start with a story about in 2010, I was in Doha in Qatar. And at this point, they wanted to create a campus to invite other universities from other countries and create satellite campuses. So they went to the closest neighbor, which was Europe. This was in 1997. How many of you believe that, or what did you think the response was from the European countries? Well, they kind of passed on it, weren't too sure. So the Qataris then went to the next neighbor, the United States, and of course, they kind of gladly accepted. So first came the Virginia Community University, or Commonwealth University, sorry, in 1997. The Europeans were still thinking about it. Then came Cornell, opened up a medical campus in Qatar at this Doha's education city. Then came Texas A&M. Still European countries thinking about it. Then came Carnegie Mellon, then came Georgetown University. Some of the big players started coming in, then Northwestern, and then finally in 2010, the first European country said, well, maybe we should have a go at this and look at it. So they went in, and then in 2012, the last of the universities to fill the spots was the University College of London. So the point is here, just with this example, you know, adapting to change or changing to adapt, this operates at a human level, at an individual level, at a group level, at a corporate level, and even at a country level or culture level. And interestingly enough, when I went to the UCL website, and they were the last ones to join this coalition, you know, their big headline was Disruptive Thinking Since 1826. And I kind of had to chuckle a little bit, because disruptive thinking is great, but without action, it's just a thought. So continuing with this discussion now, here we have, if you can see it, if you can identify it, it's quite well camouflaged, is an octopus. And the opening question is, does an octopus adapt to change or change to adapt? And again, just to kind of clarify, one is in the first case, something from the external world occurs, and we are then put in a position to respond and react, as opposed to the second option, changing to adapt, where you're going out with an intention. You're making changes, you're trying to accomplish something. You're not sure if you're going to achieve it, but you give it a shot. And this was the case with the Doha Education City, when some university decided to, let's have a go, let's make a significant shift and try something out. Whereas then the later ones saw the change already happen and said, okay, now we need to respond because there are only a few slots left. So we're going to try the first breakout session here if possible. We'll see if it works. So the question is, are you one who mostly adapts to a change or changes to adapt? And if you would like to talk about your company's philosophy, you know, it's up to you. However you feel likely inclined. So I will, how many are we in the group here? Did you say, Susanna?
We're 15 at the moment.
15, okay. So what I will do is I will create, let's see, add room, 5 rooms, or should I, yeah. I will do 4 rooms. And we'll see how that works. I will open all rooms. Are we all back?
So we are back again.
Okay.
Yes.
I sent you off into a virtual room. The only thing, Claudia, I didn't see that you joined the room. You're supposed to be in room 2. Were there difficulties, or are you there, Claudia? Okay. Because room 2 only had 2 people. I will adjust. I may switch some of you for the next round. But everyone seemed to have joined. Okay. Just before we continue to the next slide, let me go back to play. With regards to this octopus picture, I forgot to mention, I don't know if any of you have Netflix. It's kind of the Netflix times with COVID in winter. There is a great movie called My Octopus Teacher, which I would highly recommend if you haven't seen it already. If you want to see a creature that knows how to adapt to change and change to adapt, and very intellectual and very socially savvy, then check out this documentary. It's really worth it. So I will begin by talking about briefly about the EPIC model, which I discovered having worked 16 years with youth in conflict with the law. And what I noticed was development in change and adaptation naturally occurs when 4 things happen. And the EPIC model is a naturally occurring model. I mean, it's like gardening, you know, it's just like a gardener doesn't tell the plant how to grow. The gardener just creates the conditions, providing enough sun, making sure there's enough sun, water, soil quality, and then the plant does its thing. And people are quite similar. So explore is about just, we're curious, you know, we are curious beings by nature. So if you create an environment where exploration can occur, then humans will naturally explore. We are naturally playful by nature as well too. And there have been many studies that show that we learn through play and fun. And for example, even doing this now for me is a bit playful. Doing the breakout sessions, I've been in these before, but I haven't done one myself. So you explore, you fool around, you try things out, you experiment. We had a failure at the beginning. I accept that. And, but then you learn from it and you go on. And with conflict resolution, I've noticed that play is the best way to learn how to resolve conflict, because what's worse than a conflict is ending the play because of the conflict. So usually children, young people will find a way to resolve an issue because they know they're having fun with the project. And if you have this culture in your company, if the Stimmung, I like this word Stimmung, I always go to German when I think of a word that fits better. When the environment is conducive to fun and learning, then conflicts have a tendency to be resolved more easily. We are naturally seeking to inspire others and be inspired by others. And by sharing stories, by going into these breakout rooms, you meet people, you hear things, you learn. You're like, wow, that was a great idea. Maybe I should try this. And this is what's great about inspiration, is that it has no precursor. It can happen at any moment. Walking in nature, talking to someone, watching a movie, it just happens. So again, if you have an environment where you're allowing inspiration to naturally manifest, everyone benefits. The last one is connect. We are social animals and we want to connect. And we want to connect with ourselves, meaning we want to learn what our innate abilities are, what our interests are. We definitely want to connect with others, which is another reason of using these breakout sessions. And with younger generations and younger people, we're seeing it. There is a need. I think the need has always been there. It's been a bit suppressed, but young people are having this desire to connect with nature. This is why sustainability is so big with companies, and why when young people are searching for jobs, they're looking at mission statements, they're looking at vision, they're looking at how is this company operating with a zero carbon footprint, for example. And this will only, I think, increase. So to create this environment where the EPIC model can occur, you need to create and sustain change. You've got to act more like a coach and less like a scorekeeper. And if you look at traditional management styles, it's about, who's doing right, who's doing wrong, who's got, the higher score, who's got the most sales. And I'm not saying these are important measures, but to just rely solely on these, you will only go so far. And as I said, failure, a failure culture is something that needs to be looked at, in any company. What does it mean to fail? How is failure perceived? And in the picture, just to show you, the parent is looking at the child. You don't really need to tell the child what to do. If the conditions are right, the child will naturally explore, play, inspire, and connect. And as humans and as adults, we do the same. If you look at your employees, it's really the same. So we're going to try again to go back into a breakout room. I will try to make it more balanced. And again, a lot of companies do use the EPIC model because it naturally occurs. So this is really nothing new. But I would like for you to be a little bit more reflective and look at kind of companies that you worked for, companies that you're running, companies that you're in. Where do you see exploration, play, inspiration, and connection occurring, and what results has it produced? So maybe it's a continuation of the dialogue that you had earlier. Maybe it's a new conversation. I will give you again 5 minutes for this. Let's have a go. Breakout room. And I may shift some of you.
Da warten wir noch auf die... Ja, Frau Thun, jetzt sind wir alle... Also, wir sind die gleiche Runde wieder. Susanne fehlt noch, die Susanne Kallanian, falls er die gleichen wieder zusammenwürfelt.
Das ist ja wirklich originell. Das ist mein erstes interaktives Zoom-Meeting. Vorhin, muss ganz ehrlich sagen, habe ich mir den Tee geholt. Entschuldigung, weil das irgendwie nicht geklappt hat. Ich muss mich dafür entschuldigen. Aber ich wollte auch vorher fertig sagen, ich glaube, die wichtigste Fähigkeit ist, wenn es darauf ankommt, dass man sehr wohl sich adapten kann und auf der anderen Seite aber prinzipiell bereit für Change ist und diesen Versuch durchzuziehen, beziehungsweise wo man eine Chance sieht oder wo man die Möglichkeit hat, sich oder sein Unternehmen oder wo man gerade ist, weiterzuentwickeln. Und diese Kombination, glaube ich, das ist nicht schwarz oder weiß, das ist eine Mischung und eine Einstellung in der Persönlichkeit, die es in der Summe ausmachen. Das wäre mein Beitrag vom ersten noch dazu gewesen. Danke.
Das ist so situationsabhängig. Es sind beide Wege gute Wege und führen zum Ziel. Man muss halt,
Ja, Leute, die nur verbessern wollen, zum Beispiel, werden vielleicht scheitern oder die nur Neues machen wollen, wenn sie überhaupt nicht kompromissbereit sind und sich auch überhaupt nicht anpassen können. Und auf der anderen Seite nur anpassen und reagieren ist auch schlecht, weil das ist halt einfach das übliche Mitarbeitermodell. Ja, 85% auf dieser Welt, wie wir wissen, sind ja Gejagte und 15% sind Jäger. Und wenn du nur ein Gejagter bist, dann ist das Fußvolk. Und diese Mischung aus zwar gejagt sein können, wenn es notwendig ist, aber eigentlich grundsätzlich ein Jäger, das ist, glaube ich, das Erfolgsrezept. Und diese Kombination haben eben sehr wenige. Und auf die kommt es dann letztlich an. Das ist mein Eindruck von der Welt.
Wunderbar, herrlich.
Alle
von der Seele.
dafür? Okay.
Bild mitgegeben, ja.
Da kann man eine von diesen Reactions da machen, Daumen hoch, sehen Sie das? Da unten in der Menüleiste haben Sie diese React, also in dem Banner unten, und da kann man dann diese Reaction machen, genau.
Ah, jetzt habe ich die muss man aber extra immer anzeigen, diese Zeile.
Ja, die kommt manchmal, ja, manchmal ist sie immer dabei, das kann ich nicht sagen,
das ist wirklich originell.
Ja. Ja.
Freue mich sehr, dabei zu sein.
Wie gesagt, ich sehe es ähnlich wie Sie. Ich habe vorher im Immobilien-Business bei Sibiri gearbeitet und bin jetzt eigentlich verantwortlich für alle Softwareprodukte, die wir ausrollen. Und ganz, ganz wichtig ist, dass man einfach das wirklich annimmt. Wir haben es halt nicht in unserer DNA. Ja. Das Outlook haben wir mittlerweile in unserer DNA. Ja. Wir können die E-Mails lesen und wir können sie am Handy lesen und wir können sie am Tablet lesen und so weiter. Aber alle anderen Tools sind halt trotzdem, das sehe ich halt im Business-Tools und die sind nicht so simpel wie eine WhatsApp oder irgendein anderer Messenger, mit dem man vielleicht jetzt ganz tagtäglich arbeitet. Und das muss man erst akzeptieren und man muss aber dann sich anpassen und sein Daily Business etwas ändern. Und das ist ganz, ganz schwer und hier suche ich immer wieder Role Models, weil wenn es nicht von oben kommt, der eine oder andere Junior checkt das schon, ja, also absolut. Es gibt natürlich die da sich ganz viel leichter anpassen oder auch diesen Change leben wollen. Aber es gibt halt die halt einfach so mittrotten, wie Sie sagen, diese 85%, die halt gejagt werden oder halt einfach so mitmachen, wie teilweise die Lemminge. Und das ist eigentlich so schade, ja, dass das, also da ist viel, viel mehr Arbeit von diesen 15% notwendig, dass ich sage, ich mache das jetzt so, weil das ist die Zukunft einfach und das unterstützt mich und das hilft mir und das ist effizienter oder es bringt uns mehr Value oder wie auch immer. Ja.
Kommt auf die Führungspersönlichkeit an. Manche wollen Lemminge, ja. Ein Schwacher will ja auch keine Starken haben.
Ja, das stimmt.
Und ich brauche halt schon sehr viel Charakter und selbst Value, wenn ich einen Starken oder Starke neben mir akzeptieren will. Und da denke ich wahrscheinlich, oder denken sehr, sehr viele zu kurz gefasst und denken, okay, die sägen an meinem Bein, aber dass sie letztlich, wenn sie sich mit Starken umgeben, gemeinsam stärker sind, das sehen die wenigsten. Und ich sehe auch das große Problem jetzt zum Beispiel, das fängt an bei der Impfanmeldung, weil die Leute einfach nicht abgeholt werden.
Everyone back?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We're getting the hang of this little by little. So, you know, for me, the EPIC model is a way to create a culture that more so changes to adapt, because it's a continuous process. It keeps on going. It doesn't just hit you when there's a crisis or when there's something going on. And because people or a person or a company is trained to be in this always looking to explore, always looking to experiment, always seeking inspiration, always trying to make new connections, they naturally become more adaptive, more flexible, and more agile. So we will now go to the third part, which is how can you help foster change in general, whether it's changing to adapt or adapting to change. And a book that I can recommend, again, we're in the book reading season, is this book, Switch. It's an old one. I mean, old one, it's about 10 years old, but it's a goodie. You know, sometimes the oldies are goodies. And I would recommend this book to anyone interested in change management. And most of the following, the next 3 slides come from more or less this, the takeaways that I took from this book. And also there was a tie-in with the EPIC model as well too. So let's put it really simply. For anything to change, someone has to start acting differently. It's the bottom line, quite simply said, but as we know, much more difficult to achieve. And in the book, Chip and Dan Heath, they talk about the emotional elephant, the rational rider, and they talk about shaping the path. So going to the rider and the elephants, the rider is our cognitive, our thoughts, and the elephant is usually our emotion. And it's what motivates us. And shaping the path is the environment, the conditions under which we are operating. And if you can influence and shape these 3, you have a likely, a higher percentage of being successful with whatever change or adaptation you're trying to achieve. So before going into the next slides, I would like for you to think about a change process that you are either in, you were in, or maybe looking to go into. And it can be at a personal level or at an organizational level. So just take a moment to think of a change process that you are either in, currently in, or will be in. So, and just to summarize, the rider equals your thoughts, the elephant equals your emotions, and the path equals your environment and the conditions. So, how easily do you think it is to convince him of doing something differently? Directing the rider. Something that's surprising is that what often looks like resistance is often a lack of clarity. So usually when change occurs, and I've experienced this personally, I'm sure everyone in this session has, the main question that usually comes up is, why do we have to do things differently? What's wrong with what we're doing now? So it's resistance, but a lot of times it's just a lack of clarity. And when things are unclear, when there's ambiguity and uncertainty, this exhausts the rider and the elephant. And the person goes back to default. It just basically does status quo. I will not change. I don't need to. I don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense. Why bother? And this is what you want to avoid. So how do you avoid it? Describe a compelling destination. So it needs to be quite clear and compelling, not just clear, but also compelling as to why the change is necessary. Because if you have people in your team, which every team has one, there's someone who likes to debate, there's someone who likes to overanalyze, do anything possible to deride whatever it is you're trying to achieve. Another way to help alleviate that problem of getting the rider to kind of follow you in what you want to do is provide clear, simple, reasonable, and measurable guidelines to the critical moves. You don't need to have the whole plan listed out, but just things need to be clear, simple, reasonable, and if you can, measurable. Another crucial part is building upon small wins. So breaking down larger chunks into smaller pieces. And then from that, building upon those, scaling the successes. You know, the question is, how often do companies scale successes rather than spending time on looking at what hasn't worked and what's failed and focusing on that? So if we can shift the perspective on scaling successes, these small wins, you are more likely to convince the rider to continue. And something extremely important, which I've seen in organizations, is that the naysayers are usually somehow shut up or quieted or ignored. And a lot of times the critic is usually in support of what you're doing. It may be that they are just not interested, or maybe they're not in agreement with the how. And maybe they can provide additional tips or perspectives that you don't see. A lot of times they can see your blind side. And this information is also good to have. Now, earlier I said, have in mind a change management process. So I'd like for you to take one of these points and apply it. Just note it, because when we go into our final breakout session, I would like for you to share that story. So think of a change management process that you're in and pick just one of these. I mean, you can pick more, of course, but just note one of these bullets of how it was used to help bring about change. Or maybe it was something that wasn't done that you thought would have been helpful. You can also talk about this, but I'd rather talk about the successes and scale upon successes. So just note one of them about the rider, and we will go on now to our friend, the elephant. So motivating the elephant. What looks like laziness is often exhaustion. What does that mean? You know, working with, as a therapist in my past life, if you want someone to stop a certain behavior, you have to introduce something new and to replace it. And likewise, this is the same with change, but just in the reverse. If you want to add something new, you need to take something away. Because everyone will say, I'm so busy at work, I'm so busy, I don't have time, I don't have the energy. So it's important to remove something off the plate if you're going to add something new, because change itself is also new. It requires energy, it requires time. So you need to give people that space. Now, we tend to be in an analyze, think, change mode, but this is not really too helpful. We need to shift to a see, feel change. You need to strike some type of emotional chord within your people, within your customers, within yourself. And to give an example, it's called the programmer syndrome. And this means that programmers typically are very proud of their work. They think that their programs that they've created are the best, and that if you don't know how to use it, it's because you're clueless, you don't understand, you just don't get it. And if you understood, it would be fine. So they conducted an experiment where this mentality was going on. And what they did was, instead of just telling the programmers the difficulties of the users, they actually put the programmers in a room with a one-way mirror glass and watch the users actually use the software. The programmers were then able to see the frowns, the behavior, the physical response, the frustration, and right away they started to empathize with these users. And they no longer saw them as clueless. They saw them now as, wow, empathy started to rise within these programmers. And within a few minutes, just through this observation, they were able to make adjustments and adaptations to make the software or the program more user-friendly. And why? Because they went from a see, feel, change. Another way to motivate the elephant is to shift to internal motivators. You know, threats and deadlines are used, but solely relying on this alone won't get you too far. It will get you burnout. It will get your talent looking for greener pastures. So internal motivators are, trying to establish, create ownership, collaboration, optimism. And again, the EPIC model, as an example, fosters all of these. Shrink the change. Again, like what I said before on the last slide, small targets, small successes relate to small victories. When people start seeing that they're winning the small battles, it starts encouraging this behavior that you want to continue seeing, and it instills hopes and it instills new habits to achieve the goal. Again, you're seeing in companies, corporate branding is really big. The diversity and inclusivity is really big. Culture, if you go on LinkedIn and look at jobs, it's no longer just head of human resources. It's head of culture, head of people, head of inclusivity. And there's a reason for that, because to motivate the elephant, this is how you shape people's identity, your employees. They need to belong to something greater than just the company name and the company product. And you want them to feel like they are the change makers. They're not just the workers, but they are actually the change makers. And in the end, the elephant has to believe that it is capable of conquering the change. Now, again, go back to your example of change management, past, present, or future. If one of these bullets stand out in that process, please note it down. And it can also be something you discuss in the last round. So just pick one of the four that you've personally used or experienced. We all know what this is. This is the map of IKEA. And why did I use this as an example? This is great. I love this slide. Because when it comes to shaping the path, no one does it better than IKEA. You don't have to think. You just have to move your legs. The arrows on the floor tell you where to go. They send you through the maze, no problem. They are shaping your environment. They're telling you, they're showing you the path to take. And there's a goal at the end of doing all of that. And for me, this is a really important one. What looks like a people problem is often a situation problem. And I think companies make this mistake a lot. Humans make this mistake a lot. We tend to point the finger at people versus looking at what were the conditions that created this situation. Because a lot of times, once you alter the environment, people's behaviors also change. So the question is, how can you tweak the environment for success? And again, if you look at IKEA's plan here, as I said, it's a great example. Another example is shortening the perceived distance to the goal. And this is kind of a repeated theme in all three. Breaking things down, smaller goals, smaller successes, smaller victories. So there was an experiment done with a car wash. And when you go to coffee shops, it's the same. They give you a little stamp card, and every time you go, they stamp one. And then once you get to 10, you get your free coffee or your free car wash. So the experiment was this. They gave one group of people a card with 10 stamps. But when you first went there, they already punched 2 out. So you had 8 left to do. In the second group, they just gave them a card of 8 stamps only, but did not punch any. So the goal was the same. Both groups had to go back 8 times to get their free car wash or free coffee. And lo and behold, the group that had already 2 punched were 34% more likely to return, in comparison with the 19% who felt that they had to start from 0. Although both groups had to just get 8 more. So again, it's this psychological aspect of tweaking the environment, shortening the distance of the perceived goal. Another huge one is what's called the fundamental attribution error, blaming people versus the situation. So in the airline industry, for example, they realized that the most dangerous time for a flight is landing and takeoff. And so that's typically under 10,000 feet. So it's not, I mean, they trained their pilots as best as they could, but things can go wrong. So they realized they had to look at the environment to reduce the amount of risk for problems or troubles. So they put in a no talking ban. There's no talking allowed in the under 10,000 in whether you're taking off or landing, to minimize, to improve the conditions, to improve the environment, to reduce the risk of an accident. There's another example of a woman in an office, just how your desk is set up. So simply just looking at your office and how your office is set up has a huge impact. So this woman thought she was a great manager. She thought that she had good listening skills. She thought that she showed great empathy. And when she got her review, it came back the other way. And why? They looked at her office. She sat kind of like me and like most of us do, chair, desk, and then the two chairs on the other side. And what the feedback was, when she was talking with people, she saw herself looking at her screen continuously, checking email, seeing what popped up. And this was distracting her and taking her away from the conversation. So simply by looking at the room, she rearranged her desk, or they rearranged her desk so that it was up against the wall, and the chairs were then behind her. So when people came into the room, she had to swivel her chair around and just look at the people that were sitting there. There were no disruptions. There were nothing to distract her. And then when the next review came, interestingly enough, her scores of empathy, listening, all went up. She wasn't a different person. She didn't go to any type of special training. She just altered her environment. Personally, they've done research with small plates, big plates. If you want to eat less, just get a smaller plate. Shape the environment, shape the conditions under which you're operating. One-click purchasing, the fewer steps you can make for your customer to purchase your product, buy your service, the easier it is. And of course, emotional and psychological safety is really huge. I think you're seeing that even more and more. I think what COVID brought out is that there are mental health issues within companies, and COVID didn't bring about mental health issues. Mental health issues pre-existed COVID. What COVID did was exacerbate the conditions. Just to give you a quick example, I'm currently working with a young girl right now who had a hand washing compulsion. So she had this before COVID. She's an apprentice. Now with COVID, she found herself like showering every morning for 1 hour. She was, coming to work barely on time. Her colleagues noticed that her attention span wasn't that great. She was, she was distracted a lot by the situation. Her performance was slipping. She had to meet with, her direct supervisor. And again, if you look at the fundamental attribution era, it's the situation that was creating her problem, not her, because she had it under control before. So here she is now looking at maybe losing her apprenticeship because of the situation. So, instead of a company just looking at her and saying, well, we need to let her go, her performance is slipping, how can you look at the conditions to help her be successful? And this is just one small example, which I think is happening a lot in many companies. Okay, so actually, let me go back to that slide. So here we now have the three: directing the rider, motivating the elephant, and shaping the path. If you would like to pick one of these bullets as well too, thinking about your example of change facilitation, change management process, you should now have a bullet for how you've directed the rider, or how the rider was directed, how the elephant was motivated, and how the path was shaped. And I will send you back into the last breakout session to share these experiences with each other. Give me a second here. And I may move you around again just to let you know.
Schönen guten Morgen.
Danke.
Ein neuer Teilnehmer.
Ich würde gerne zu euch verschoben.
Sie sind auf Mute.
Frau Reisinger?
Sie sind auf Mute.
Ist okay, danke. Hallo Alex, magst du kurz, nachdem du neu bist in unserer Runde, magst du dich kurz einmal vorstellen? Wieso ist der Alex jetzt wieder weg? Jetzt ist der Martin da, Herr Dr. Bode. Wir haben keinen Ton. Martin?
Kann man mich nicht hören?
Oh ja, jetzt schon. Jetzt ist fein. Hallo? Ja. Möchtest du ganz kurz über dich was sagen, weil wir haben uns zu Beginn vorgestellt und du bist ein Neuer in unserer Runde. Aber wir hören dich nicht. No? No?
Ich bin nicht auf Mute. Geht's jetzt?
Okay, jetzt geht's, ja. Jetzt geht's. No? No.
Ich mache nichts. I'm on and off. Ich verstehe es nicht.
Du hast einen Wackler in der Leitung. Schon wieder weg. Schon wieder weg. Okay. Okay, let's try it once again. Jetzt,
Ja.
ja, jetzt hören wir dich. No, no, it doesn't work. It doesn't work, Martin, I'm so sorry. Okay. Ja, beiden Damen. Und der Herr Kelsberg ist jetzt wieder weg. Okay, kein Problem. Konstanze, Angelika, was ist die Meinung, was in den Unternehmen bei euch das beleuchtet wird?
Ich kann jetzt für mich nur aus meinen eigenen Erfahrungen sprechen. Also ich war vorher Unternehmensjuristin und habe M&E-Projekte abgewickelt in einem internationalen Konzern, habe mich dann eigentlich habe den Job beendet, habe dann noch ein Studium gemacht, ein zweites, habe dann angefangen, jetzt als Transformationsberaterin und Business Coach zu arbeiten. Und dadurch bin ich natürlich sehr viel mit all diesen Dingen beschäftigt, auch aus eigener Erfahrung, weil man dann natürlich in eine ganz andere Ebene geht. Ja, auf einmal ist man konfrontiert, Kundenakquise. Es geht nicht nur, die Leute zu betreuen innerhalb des Prozesses, sondern Angst vor Zurückweisung, immer wieder diese Konfrontation mit dieser Zurückweisung. Ja, bekomme ich jetzt einen neuen Kunden, bekomme ich den jetzt nicht? Das macht psychologisch etwas mit dir. Also ich habe da jetzt alle Phasen eigentlich durch. Wie kann ich den Elefanten reiten? Das hat sehr viel mit Emotionen zu tun. Also was ich selber beobachtet habe, also man geht da durch sehr viele emotionale Up and Downs eben durch. Ich glaube, das ist ganz wichtig, dass man da wirklich sich selber kurzfristige Ziele setzt. Also was der Jean-Pierre wunderbar beschrieben hat, sehr viel an seinen eigenen Gedankenmustern und Glaubenssätzen arbeitet in solchen Change-Prozessen. Es hat sehr viel auch zu tun, eine Kultur ändert man dann, wenn die Führungskraft sich ändert. Also das Unternehmen kann sich ja meistens erst nur so weiterentwickeln, wie die Gedanken und Glaubensmuster der Führungskraft reichen. Und da fängt es natürlich an, wenn es eine Führungskraft ist, die Angst besetzt ist und Angst vor Veränderungen hat, dann wird der in der Schockstarre sich nicht anfangen, weiter zu bewegen. Also wie gehe ich da um? Es fängt ja jeder Veränderungsprozess mit der Führungskraft an und mit niemandem anderen. Und ja, oder was vorher erwähnt worden ist von der Frau Thun, eine schwache Führungskraft wird keine starken Leute um sich haben wollen. Das heißt, man muss auch da mit Mindset arbeiten, der Führungskraft. Warum hält der keine starken Leute aus? Ja, das hat mit Macht und Kontrolle zu tun. Also man arbeitet wirklich sehr viel an diesen Stellschrauben, was ja dann auch wirklich Spaß macht. Und ich glaube, dann kann man sehr viel, und wichtig ist, dass diese Führungskraft immer zuerst geht, als Vorbildfunktion. Also anders geht es nicht. Ja. Weil man muss ja davon ausgehen, dass es gibt diese Kübler-Ross-Kurve, dass jeder durch einen Sterbeprozess durchgeht in Veränderungsprozessen. Das heißt, Altes gilt es loszulassen. Irgendwann kommt man dann an die Essenz des Unternehmens oder jedes Einzelnen. Also was ist, und dann geht es darum, eine höhere Vision und eine Intention zu finden. Das heißt, dass man da jetzt dieser höheren Intention dann folgt in weiterer Folge. Und das ist ein spannender Prozess, aber das braucht auch Zeit. Ja, und da braucht es einfach ganz andere, bewusste Führungskräfte, die in der Lage sind, solche Prozesse zu halten, ja, und vor allem den Raum zu halten, dass diese Veränderungen möglich sind, weil eben jeder einzelne im Unternehmen da durchgeht.
Aber deswegen sind auch diese kleinen Quick Wins, wie wir sie eben nennen, so wichtig, dass ich ja immer ein kleines Erfolgserlebnis habe, weil ich ja doch mich verändern muss und der Mensch ein Gewohnheitstier ist. Also darum, es ist ganz, ganz wichtig. Und wenn ich dann motivieren kann, die Leute, dann ist es natürlich noch ja, wichtiger. Aber also wir versuchen diese, und ich merke es jetzt, wenn wir ein neues Produkt ausrollen in einer unserer Business Lines, dann schaue ich immer, okay, wer hat wirklich Interesse, wer ist motiviert, die nehme ich mal zuerst und nicht über alle drüber auf einmal, weil das geht eh nicht. Ich habe ja so viele Leute, das funktioniert nicht. Aber wenn ich Motivierte dann nehme, dann sind das quasi nachher meine Botschafter, meine Multiplikatoren oder wie ich es auch immer nennen will. Und die sind dann motiviert, weil die haben einen Quick Win gehabt und das bringt denen vielleicht viel mehr, weil die anderen können noch immer im alten Prozess da weiterhin trotten. Ja? Und irgendwann ist es aber dann vielleicht notwendig und wir sehen es ja eben vor allem wir sind ein Immobiliendienstleister, eben auch Büromakler, da sehen wir, dass es notwendig ist, dass wir uns öffnen, ändern, weil es gibt halt alles schon im Internet auch. Man muss sich dann man muss irgendeinen einen Value dem Kunden dann bringen, aber dann muss ich mich auch ändern, muss ich meinen Prozess ändern. Und das sehen sie halt noch nicht, weil es halt jetzt noch so gut gegangen ist und darum ist Covid gerade hilft da meines Erachtens, aber sie wollen es halt noch immer nicht sehen. Manche, ja. Also man kann es nicht vergeneralisieren, aber ja. Und diese Quick Wins ist, glaube ich, das Wichtigste. Alles in kleine Stücke und do less better, ja. Also das sind irgendwie meine Hauptmotivatoren für die Leute, weil wenn es ihnen zu viel ist, das ist wie wenn man ein ganzes Zimmer zum Zusammenräumen hat. Ja, dann soll man halt mit einem Meckern anfangen. Also, ja.
Weil natürlich diese innere Entwicklung, die braucht so viel Energie und Kraft, weil im Gehirn andere Gehirnbahnen verknüpft werden müssen. Ja? Das heißt, andere Autobahnen fangen an zu aktiv zu werden und das braucht eine gewisse Zeit, bis die neuen Verhaltensmuster, bis man sich daran gewöhnt.
Mhm.
Und
sehr, sehr. Kann man mich hören?
jetzt
Ja.
Ja, also bevor ich wieder weg bin, es ist unglaublich interessant, was Sie erzählen, wirklich. Also das will ich sehr, sehr gern vertiefen, aber wir haben nur mehr 30 Sekunden Zeit. Ja, das ist eine zentrale Anforderung, glaube ich, an jedes Unternehmen, hier mit der Zeit zu gehen. Und danke für diese tollen Ausführungen. Ja. Sehr interessant. Übrigens, wer mich noch hören kann, Frau Koger, ich bin auch M&E Anwalt. Ja, und, ja. Es change bei jedem Projekt ja und nein. Also, ja.
Natürlich.
Ja.
Das ist meistens unterschätzt, ja? Also was es mit den Menschen macht und das Gap dazwischen. Und das gilt es zusammenzubringen.
That pretty much is the presentation for today, and we are about at 10 o'clock as well. I would just like to go to the last slide and just say that, you know, in some really organizations that changes to adapt is better able to adapt to change. You know, if you're used to going out, trying things out, experimenting, playing, having fun, then when a crisis comes, for example, you know, I knew some companies that were already doing remote office, remote work before COVID. So for them, it was like not a big deal, or they had systems in place to handle this already. Other companies that didn't have it still kept on, you know, doing things as things used to be, had a harder time. That's just one example. So the EPIC model is in combination with these lessons of directing the rider, shaping the path, and motivating the elephant are all ways to create a culture where you are instilling this, you know, changing to adapt versus waiting till crisis comes, waiting till the unexpected comes, waiting for that from the outside to come. can open it up for some questions. Another book that I would also strongly recommend in addition to Switch is my book, What You Can Learn from Your Teenager, Lessons in Parenting and Personal Growth. Usually people at mid-level in their careers are usually, if their parents are parents to teenagers or preteens, and even if you have younger ones, there are also lessons to be taken. If you want, you can send me an email, and I'm gladly to send you a copy of the book. It's also on Amazon. Any questions? Or Susanna, I guess it's the question to you. Is it okay? It's 5 past now. Can we open it up for some questions if there are any?
Yes, of course. If someone has questions, please don't hesitate. Unmute.
Or feedback even. I'm open to that as well.
So I think, yeah.
Someone? Yes.
No, I just wanted to say that the interactive model, I never had that. It's really a very, very nice experience. And you just don't listen and have your coffee, but you really think and you argue and talk to others. That was a very, very nice change for me.
Let me say that meeting in the chat rooms, this was really a premiere for the AmCham and a great and exciting experience. And I think we will adapt for this change.
100%.
Okay, Jean-Pierre, thank you for giving us such interesting insights and information. And I thank you all for joining us today. And since this is our last event this year, I wish you a blessed Christmas and all the best and health for the next year. Thank you so much for all of you for joining. Take care, stay healthy, and we really look forward to seeing you again in the new year.